All right. Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. Uh, at the moment, this is Stephen J. Holiday, founder and presenter, IDM Ministries and Associations, where every day is a little more like heaven than the day before. I had a friend tell me one day, and it wasn't that long ago, about a month ago. His first name begins with the letter O. So if he catches this, what's up? I don't have his permission to talk about this, so I don't want to use his real name. But anyway, he says, this is kind of something. You ought to write a book. I said, I don't know about writing a book, but that was a little while ago. Now we're at least where we are right now, um, in a position where people are pretty nervous, pretty scared. We're This is the this is March 26th, 2020, and we're kind of smack dab in the middle of what's being called coronavirus or COVID-19, and people are in a shelter-in-place order for most of the country and a lot of the world, and people are a little bit nervous and scared. So I was remembering this conversation, and if this is encouraging somebody or help somebody make some future planning in their own thinking, that would be great. So I'm going to switch over to another camera and show you kind of what we were talking about. And this may work or not, this high-tech system I have, but we'll see how this goes. All right. So I was telling my friend about this, and obviously I didn't have a clipboard and a piece of paper, but this is the way I process it. Okay, so let's say we have a little cart, just two wheels, and I'm not going to draw the horse or the ox or whatever it would have been, but you got this little cart. Okay, and let's say this is about, I'd say this is about the 1820s. Okay, now this is just talking about the U.S. economy, but it could be anybody. All right, I mean, it could be the dates may not be the same, but basically this is the way it works. So in the 1820s, you have, and I'll just call this a tinker or a tinkerer. When I was a kid, they had what were called tinker toys, and basically a tinkerer, and if we even use the term, he was just tinkering around. Basically, he would have like pots and pans. And sometimes he'd sell medicine or oils. My grandparents, my dad still has on his wall some pictures that are put in this big old frame. Somebody came into town selling these frames, and this frame's been around for, I don't know, probably over almost 100 years by now, and it's still working. And somebody just came through town and had some stuff they were selling. Anyway, in the 1820s, you just have a tinkerer who would just travel from town to town. And in Europe it would be similar, like the gypsy bands that would bring stuff in. So they had different names, but anyway, let's say that's about the 1820s. Okay, now obviously things were a lot more sophisticated on the east than say in the frontier, but let's say around 1860s, 1850s to 1860s, and obviously America was in a civil war around this time, so things got a little bit ugly. But let's say this little tinker wagon has turned into what most people, unless you were in a pretty up and coming, unless you're in a fairly up and coming area, like say New York or Boston or something like that, you would have what would be called a general store, okay? Or another term for it would be the mercantile or the mercantile exchange or something like that, okay? And this would be a store that that had everything in it. So you would pick up a couple of nails for your barn, or you might pick up some burlap sacks of flour for your wife to make some bread, or you'd find cloth, material to make clothing. The fact is, everything was in this general store. It was a one-stop shop, not because that was terribly convenient, but because that was the only way to do it, right? Okay, so then let's jump up to say the 1920s, the Roaring 20s. All right, now In the 20s, we find these amazing, and some of the architecture is still there today, these storefronts. And I don't know what it looks like in your neighborhood, but most of the cities, big cities, little cities, they have this downtown area, right? And it's got a curb, and you park right here, and you can, they had a specialty of whatever they were selling. I'm gonna put a mannequin in here, but it didn't matter if it was a record player, didn't matter if it was some sort of piece of equipment, didn't matter if it was like a hardware store or a toy store. And the fun thing to do was almost an American tradition, and I'm assuming in places like Europe and other locations it was probably the same thing. It was this idea of window shopping up and down the downtown area, just looking. You can even see this in some movies, like I always think of Ralphie looking through the window in the movie, what is it, The Christmas Story, where he's looking at the Red Ryder BB gun, right? That's that window shopping thing. Okay, now 1920s bleeds into, say, the post-war generation, 1950s, 1960s. Everybody wants to go to the big malls. Okay, why do they want to go to the mall? Well, if you go to the mall, you can do similar stuff to what you see at the in the window shopping model, but at the mall you get to go to this giant location and have one parking place and not have to be outdoors. You get to go into this door or the door on this side and walk up and down the mall, sometimes 2 and even 3 stories, to see all the things that they have for you at the mall. Now, when this took place in middle America, say 50s to 60s, over here, people turned their back on the mom and pop shops. They stopped taking a look at these places, and these places fell on pretty hard times. Now, in some areas, they kept their downtown running very well, but most of these smaller shop owners started to transition, maybe out of this kind of model into a barber shop or a beautician shop or even a tattoo parlor or some adult magazine store. I mean, this downtown really took a hit. So here's the malls. Now, from the malls, this is kind of the generation I start walking into. Let's move this way. We get to, say, 1980s, late 80s, 1990s. We see, what do we see? Walmart. I remember the first time I'd never really heard of or been to a Walmart. My uncle took me in, and it was sensory overload. It was huge. Not too much later, we get Costco and Target and all the big bang stores, right? So now you have massive, everything you could possibly want. You buy your tires at the same place where you can buy your bananas. And they have these giant warehouse doors, and then everything's just block framing, nothing showy and beautiful like these malls tried to be. Certainly nothing like this architecture, this beautiful downtown architecture, and then the artwork of showing and displaying in the inner what look right here in the window, what we have inside, right? Then you have, okay, so watch what happens here, okay? You have the Walmart that has everything you possibly want, okay? Now, the Walmart starts to look amazingly like the general store. The general store was actually an improvement on what was kind of between the Tinker and the general store, which was the Sears Roebuck catalog. My granddad used to tell a story about an old lady who wrote a letter to the Sears Roebuck company and said, I would like to order some toilet paper. And the catalog people said, well, there's a real easy way to fix that. All you have to do is go to our catalog, find out the order number, and mail it back to us, and we will send you the toilet paper you need. She wrote a letter back, said, if I had your catalog, I wouldn't need the toilet paper. The Sears Roebuck catalog had everything you could possibly imagine. I have some older replicas of like the 1920s catalogs, and you could actually buy a house in a kit sent to your location. So we go from this little tinker traveling through town to people using the general store, and if they were so far out, they'd be using the catalog about the same time frame as here, maybe around 1880s. And then you have from the general store, the catalogs, then you have the window shopping, then you have the malls, then you have the giant box stores, the Walmarts and the Costcos. Okay, now what have we seen lately? We see people doing a couple of things. We see the young people gravitating towards this smaller shop experience. Why are they gravitating towards this smaller shop experience? Well, for a couple of reasons. One, they don't want to be at the mall. Two, they feel like they're swimming in the giant Costcos, the giant box stores. The other thing they're doing is they're gravitating towards this e-commerce, this ordering things on Amazon. It's basically the same thing as ordering and having delivered to your home from the catalogs, but now it's online shopping. So where does this put us? Where does this take us? Well, I don't think that this or this is going anywhere, but you can see that the Amazons and the even some of the brick and mortar stores have made a switch and are trying to take these folks on, like Walmart. But the Amazon thing, that e-commerce, is going to change a lot. And right now we're in a position where it's anyone's guess. There are people that are, as I'm recording this, in lockdown. They're required to stay where they are. How is that going to change the economy as it is now? I don't know specifically, but I have some suspicions that we're heading closer to this tinker model, where people are just that entrepreneurial thing, where people are going to be independent and selling things at the one-on-one level. And then I also see we're moving away from, I think, the general store and the mall model, and more into the catalog and maybe the window shopping in the downtown market. I think the smart money is on the small town America shops for things like coffee, things like fitness, where you take a class in fitness rather than one of these giant big box gymnasium type places. I think we're heading into that, and I don't know why, but I just have a feeling.